Hi everyone. This video is about collecting data with a user form. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is add a user form. So right click, choose Insert User Form, and then we're going to rename this user form. I'm just going to call this form Contact, because we are going to put in contact information for a person. We're going to put the first name, the last name, and address information. And we're going to put a couple of buttons on this form. So actually I'm going to reopen this properties window because I want to change the name of the user form. Where it says user form 1 here, I want to change that. So you saw that we changed the name of the form here. That is the name that we will use to refer to the form in our code. And then down here we also have this caption property, and this is where we can change the name of the form that gets displayed to the user. So I'm just going to call this Contact. And I think that's it for properties right now, but I'll just leave this window open. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is add some labels and text boxes to this form. So the text boxes are going to allow us to collect data from the user, and the labels are just going to label the text boxes. So open the toolbox, which is the one that looks like a little hammer and a wrench. And then this displays our list of controls for us. So we want to start with a label. This is the one with the big A on it. So click that and then click on your user form, and you see you get a label. And then we will also add a text box. So click on the one next to the label with the little AB, and again click on the user form. And so now we have a label and a text box. And so these are a set, and we want, I believe, 7 of these. So click and drag to select both of them, and then Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can't see it because they're getting pasted one right on top of the other. But I'll make this a little bit bigger, and then I'll just move these. So here's, oops. Okay, so there's that. And the way I did that was I clicked on one and then clicked on the other while holding the Control key down. And then I can get them without moving all of them at the same time. Okay, so we have one set, and I'm just going to kind of line them up here. 2, 3. I can't remember which one had the the ones copied on there. Nope, wasn't that one. So I just did Control-Z to move it back to where it was. Okay. And that might be it. Yeah. So Control-Z to get that back up there. So now I have, I believe, 8 sets of labels and text boxes here. And so now I'm just going to start filling these. So the label is going to tell us what information we are going to collect with the text box that it's associated with. So this first label, you see it starts out with a default name, which is label 1, and the caption for the label, which is what the user sees, is also label 1. So let's start with changing the name, which is the name of the label in the code that we will see in the code. So I'm just going to preface this with LBL, which I like to use for the label, and then underscore and first name. And then the caption for this label will be first name. And then for its associated text box, the code name, I'm going to change to txt underscore first name. And it is very important to change these names from the default because you're really going to have a hard time figuring out what is what in the code. If you just leave them with the default names, you see that text box 8, you're not going to know what that is when you start coding versus text first name. Okay, and so let's move on to the next one. And you see how they all have label 1 for the caption because we copied it. It just copied the caption, but each label, this is label 8, this is label 2, they each have a unique name, as they must. Each control must have a unique name so that we know which control we're referring to. So for this one, for the code name, let's make this label last name. And we'll make the caption last name as well. You know, and for the code, it's just, for the code name, it's just like a variable. You can't have any spaces. That's why I have the underscores here. Okay, and for the text box that's associated with this label, actually I'm just going to copy this and then just change the prefix. And then for the next one, this is going to start our address information. So the first one will be the street address. So we'll change the code name to street address. And then we'll change the caption to street address. And then I'm going to copy this again for the text box that is associated with it and just change the prefix. And for this one, I'm just going to copy the same thing because this is just going to be street address 2. I mean, you might call it P.O. Box or whatever. We're just going to call it street address 2 right now. And again, we'll change the caption also to street address 2. And then the code name for the text box, again, I'm just going to paste this and change the prefix. And then I also need to put a 2 on the end here. Okay. And then for this one is going to be the code name, label city, and then the caption that the user sees is city. And then for the text box, again, city. This next one is state. So the code name is going to be LBL state, and the caption state. The text box TXT state. And this one is going to be the zip code. So the code name will be LBL zip code. And I'll copy this for my text box. But first I'm going to change the caption that the user sees to zip code. And now I'll go to the text box and the code name. Just change this prefix. Okay. And we have an extra one here I wasn't planning to have, but we'll just go ahead and make this the country. So the code name is going to be country, and I'll copy this for my input box, but the caption that the user sees for this label is going to be country. And then for the input box, I'm just going to paste the label name and change a prefix. Okay, so now we have all of our boxes here, all of our input boxes and their labels. And so let's move this stuff down a little bit, and we'll put in one more label. So let's go over here to label, click it, and then click on our user form. Make it a little bit bigger. And in this, we're just going to put some instructions. You know, as I said, it's important to change all of the code names. And sometimes I actually don't do that. If it's just like a message, sometimes I don't do that, but I guess we'll just do it here to be consistent. So we'll just call this message to user. I mean, it's probably better to do it this way anyway, because then it's just really clear to us what it is. And then we'll do the caption. And for the caption, we can either type the caption over here in the properties window, or we can just click in here and change a caption in here. And actually I did something and then I went back and corrected my mistake, but now I'm feeling like I should show it to you in case it happens to you too and you don't know what's going on. So I double clicked on this, and then what happened was, let me close this properties window. This opened. And so let me explain something really quick. With forms, forms are unlike other code modules in VBA. Forms have two parts actually. If I double click on this icon, then I see the user form itself. However, if I right click on this, you see that I have view code or view object. So the object is this. It's the user form itself. The code is the code behind the user form. And that's what we're going to be getting to a little bit later. So what happened when I accidentally double clicked this label, the VBA editor inserted this sub for me, which we're going to talk about what this is in a little bit. This is an event for the label, and we'll talk about a little bit later what that means, but we don't need this event, so just go ahead and highlight it and delete it, and then you can close this window, and we'll be coming back to that later. So you can double click on this form contact icon to reopen the user form. And so now if I click on my label, as I said, we can either change the caption over here in the properties window, or we can change it here by clicking on it. You see how now I have my cursor is blinking in there? And so I can highlight this and I can just type over it. So I'm just going to type a message to the user. Please enter the contact details below. And so that's just some instructions for the user. And the last couple controls that we're going to add, so let me go back to my toolbox here, are a couple of buttons. So that is a toggle button. That's not what we want. We want a command button. So click on this command button and then click on your user form, and then you can either click it again and insert another one, or you could just copy the previous command button. So we're going to have two buttons on this form. One is going to be a submit button for the user to submit the information after they've filled out the form, and the other one is going to be a cancel button in case the user wants to abort the operation. They don't want to fill out the form. So let's change this one, which will be cancel. So let's change the name. And again, not to beat a dead horse or anything, but this default name that is assigned for the name of the control, the way we refer to this button, and the caption start out the same. The caption being the text that we see on the button itself. So let's change the name, the code name for this button. So I'm just going to call this BTN is going to be my prefix underscore cancel. So now I know that's a cancel button. And then for the caption, I'm going to change the caption to cancel. And so for the next button, I'm going to change the code name to submit. And I'm going to change the caption. And again, I can do it this way as well. Just highlight it here. And you see that it also changes over here to submit. Okay, so those are our two buttons. And I just move these down a tiny bit. And how you see I got when I did that, I actually got an arrow here. That's a resize arrow if I want to change the size of the buttons by dragging. So now that we have that, I feel like I want this message to be a little bit bigger. I want the font to be a little bit bigger so that we can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to click on this label and then come over here to where it says font. And you see it lists the font face, which is Tahoma. But then there's also these three little buttons here, which tells me there's more. So I'm going to click on that. And then I get this font window. And I can adjust the size. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, bump it up from 8 to about 12, I guess. And you can see the change in the size here. And we'll see how that looks. I could also make it bold if I wanted to. Let's do that. Let's just make it bold. 12. That might be too big. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, that's kind of big. So I'm going to go back here again and I'm going to make it 10. Okay, and so now I don't have enough room here in my label, so I'm going to resize it a little bit. And actually I'll just do like this. I don't know, I'm not going to spend too much time formatting this, but you get the picture. You can mess with it and get it looking how you want it to look. And right now you see we have all this first name, last name, and the address information is all kind of just it's all kind of clumped together. And later we'll talk about how we can separate it a little bit and make it look a little bit better. But for now, this is fine because we're just focusing on collecting the data from the user. So at this point, it's going to save. Oops, look at that. I didn't even save it as a macro workbook. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'll click no here. And then I'll get this window where I can just change the type to macro enabled workbook. Okay. So now let's just go ahead and run this user form so we can see it. So we just need to click on this form anywhere to select it. And then we will choose, we can either do this arrow here, where you see how it says run sub or user form. Or as you can see, we also could hit F5, or we can come under run sub user form. So any of those ways will work. So let's do that. And then we see our form pops up in a default location. And it's looking pretty good. But you see that if I click any of these buttons, They do not work. You see, I can type my name in here, but neither of these buttons work. And that is because we have not written any code yet to make them work. So that's what we're going to do now. So in order to close this form, just click the X in the upper right hand corner. Okay, so now we are going to write some code for this form. And in order to do that, there's two ways we can get to the code. I'm just going to close my toolbox and my properties window here. So we can either, like we saw before, we can right click and do view code, in which case we have this code sheet. You see up here we have the name of the module that we're in, the form. This is the sheet for the form code. Or if we come back to our user form and we double click on this submit button, you see that we have this piece of code inserted for us, just like we saw with the label. And so this is a sub that is private to this user form, and we're going to keep it private because we're really not going to have a need to run this code outside of this code module because it's a button on this form. And so it's named, if you notice, the name of this is the name of the control, the name that we gave the control. So if I go back here to the form and I reopen my properties window, we see that this button here was named button submit. And if we look at our code, we see that that is the name here. And then it has an underscore and the word click. And so what this indicates is that this is what's called an event. So if you're not familiar with events, they're pieces of code that run when a certain event occurs. So in this case, when the button is clicked, when that event occurs, the clicking of the button, then this code will run. So there's lots of different events that happen in Excel spreadsheets, and I'll do some videos on, various events at some point. But there's, for instance, you can have events that run when a cell on the spreadsheet changes, or when the workbook is opened, or when the workbook is closed, or when somebody's hovering the mouse over something. There's all kinds of different events. But the one we're going to work with now is the button click event. And just so I can show you again, also, as we said, here's the button, the name of the control, button submit, and you see it's also up here. It's in this drop-down window. And the event, the click, is over here in this window. And if I pull this down, you see that all of the controls that we put on our spreadsheet all have entries in this drop-down. And also the user form itself, because the user form itself can have events as well. And so if I look over here at this click, you see these are all the events that I can have for the button. So not just the click event. If any of these things happen with the control, I can put some code. Oops, I accidentally clicked that one. You see it inserts for us this shell, just like double clicking the button did. It inserts this shell for the procedure for that particular event. I'm just going to erase this. And so to show you, this is another way to get this shell here, because the way we got this one was from the user form. So I single click, I can select it, but if I double click, it opens. And this time, because the shell is already here, it just takes me to the procedure. And you see, if I had something in here already, double clicking is just going to take me to the existing procedure. Whereas if the procedure doesn't exist, it's going to insert it for me. Okay, so up here, as I said, we have our different buttons. So if I choose the cancel button up here, now you see it inserts for me the click event. That is the default event for buttons. That's why this one is getting inserted when I choose this. And as we saw, if I wanted to insert a different one, I would just choose it over here, and now it's entered as well. And as we saw with this mouse up one, it enters it with all of the parameters here. So it inserts the signature for us here. This is called a signature. It's called a procedure signature, which is that's like a universal term in programming. You have a function signature or a procedure signature, and it kind of defines the name of the name of the procedure, and then what parameters it takes. Anyway, that's just an aside. So anyway, you see that's how we get in these shells. We can type all this out ourselves as well. You know, it doesn't make any difference. It's just a whole lot easier to do it this way. So I'm just going to delete these two because we're not going to use these, but we are going to use the click event for the cancel button. So I'm going to leave that one there. So for the cancel button, let's actually start with that one because that's going to be the easier one. If the user clicks the cancel button, all we want to do at this point is just remove the form, is just close the form, remove it from view. And the way we do that is we have a command called unload, and then it takes an object, and the object that we want to unload is the form itself. But we are already in the code module for the form. And so the way that we can refer to this code module when we are inside of it is with the keyword me. So in this instance, this me keyword refers to this form. So we're saying unload me, close me. So let's take a look at that. Let's go back to our form. Make sure it's selected, and then we'll run it. And now we see the form comes up, and this time if we hit the cancel button, we see the form closes. So that's it for the cancel button. That's all that we're going to do with that. This button is coded, and the next button is the submit button. This one is going to be a little bit more involved. So the submit button is where the magic happens, because when the user clicks the submit button, or sometimes you have an OK button, or something along those lines, when the user clicks that button, what they're saying is, I have filled out the form, I've verified that everything is correct, and I want to give the information to you now. So when they click this button, this is where we're going to put the code to collect the information from the user. So actually, let's put in a little comment here. I don't usually do this because it's understood to me what the submit button is, but because we're just learning this now, let's put in a comment so that we're crystal clear on what this submit button is doing and why we have the code in here. So we'll say the user has filled out the form and they are submitting their data. So now we want to collect the data contained in the fields of the user form. Actually, fields being text boxes. Okay. So now, how do we do that? So we need some variables. We need variables to hold each of these pieces well, not the labels. We need variables to hold each of these pieces of information. So let's do that. Let's create, and just as an aside, this state and the country would typically be combo boxes. They'd be drop-down boxes where the user chooses their state or chooses their country. But this video is only focusing on text boxes, so we're just going to have the user type in their state and country for now, and we'll talk about combo boxes in a different video. Okay, so we're going to create a first name string variable and a last name, and these are all going to be strings. And so actually what I'll do is I'll just copy this, and I think I need 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll just change the names here. So this will be street address, and this will be street address 2, and this will be city, state, zip code, and country, and then I have a extra that I'll just get rid of. Okay, and I'm just gonna line these up because that's how I like it. I'm just tabbing. I'm just getting in front of the as and tabbing over from starting from my longest one here. Okay, so those are my variables, and now I need to collect the data from the input boxes. So it's pretty straightforward. You know, the first name variable is going to hold the data from the first name input box, etc., etc. So the way that we refer to the controls is, let's come back to this me keyword. As we said, me refers to the form itself, this form here. And contained on this form are all of the controls. So if I type the me keyword and then dot, you see I get all this stuff that is native to VBA that's, you know, Excel has put in there, Microsoft has put in there. But then I also see that I have my controls listed, and all of my controls are listed in here. And so if I start typing, you know, I get the IntelliSense. So if I do this, then I can see my buttons. And incidentally, this is why when I named my controls, I used these prefixes, because if I use these prefixes, then they're grouped together like this. I mean, it tells me what the control is. First it's a button, but then they also get grouped together like this by control type, and then I can just see alphabetically where they are. So we don't need to use our buttons right now. We are concerned with our text boxes. So here are all of our text box fields. And so I can just, you know, choose the one that I want. So the first one is first name. And I just, when I do that, I'm just hitting the down arrow and the up arrow, and you can use page down to go down a page at a time. So let me do the first name. So this is a reference to our first name text box, our input box in the code. And so this is how we refer to our controls. We're referring to the form and then the control name. And this is because we are on the form itself that we're referring to it as me. If we wanted to refer to this form from another code module, which I'll show you later. Actually, Actually, I'll show you right now. Let's right click and insert a module, just a regular module. And we'll do a procedure to open the form. So let's just do open contact form. And so now we're no longer in this code module, so we can't refer to it as me, because now me is this one, right? This is me, module 1. So the way we refer to it is just by the name. So if I type, I just did my FRM and then I did my control spacebar. And because this is the only object I have that starts with FRM, it just populated it with contact. That's why I didn't get the drop down menu to choose it and all that. Anyway, so form contact, and then if I type my dot and then my txt, again, there's all my controls. So that's how we refer to, this is how we refer to the form, the user form outside of the form's code module. And this me keyword is how we refer to the form inside of the code module. I mean, we could still do it that same way. We could do it that way, but it's done this way usually, me. So anyway, this I'm just going to get rid of for now, but let me just show you, because we will use this to open the form. The way that we open the form is we do, you know, the form name and then show. And then there's an optional parameter that goes with this called modal. And I'll show you that in a second. But first, let's just run this. So, you know, make sure your cursor is within the procedure and then click Run Sub User Form. And then you see that it opens the form. And again, we can click our cancel button because it's working now. And modal means can you do anything else while the form is open? And so if I have modal set as true, then when I run this form, oops. So I guess I don't remember what argument this takes. I thought it was true or false, but I don't remember. So I'm going to look it up. So I'm just going to search for Userform show modal, and then I'll just look here. Okay, so the show modal property, yeah, true, false. Okay, so I guess maybe if it's true, you just don't enter anything, and then you enter false if you don't want it to be modal. So let's try that, see if that works. So if I put false and then run this, okay, yeah, that's a thing. I guess you don't put true in, because true is the default. You only change it to false if you want it to be false. So what's the difference? So if I don't have this false in here and I run it, you see I can't, if I try to click over here, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm trying to click over here and do something on the spreadsheet, and I can't, because I have to deal with this form first. I either have to fill it out and submit it, or I have to cancel it before I can do anything else. And now that it's gone, now I can do this. I can do things with the spreadsheet. Whereas if I have this set to false and I run this, now even though the form is open, I still can do other things. I can move around on the spreadsheet and do, you know, whatever I want to do, and I can come back to the form and type in here as well. So that's what modal is versus not modal. If it's not modal, you can do things over here. If it is modal, you have to deal with this form first. Either do what you're supposed to do with the form or cancel it. Okay. So that's that. So that code is fine. Let's just make it modal or not modal, however you want to do it. Doesn't matter. Okay, so back to collecting data from the fields on our form. So this me is the user form. So I'm just going to do the with keyword. And then if I do that, let me put my end here. If I do that, then I can just list all of my controls, all of my text boxes within this with block. So what we want to do is, I'm going to erase this. What we want to do is we want to put the value in the text box into the variables. So if I do my first name variable, I want to set the value of the first name variable equal to the value of its corresponding text box. And I basically just want to do that with all of them. Actually, so what I want to do is, like I said, the value of the text box. This actually will work as well because the default value for a text box is the value. So this will work as well, but I think it's better just to put this in to be more clear. And so I basically just want to do that with all of them. So I want to do the last name is going to be equal to the last name value, the value of the last name text box, and then the street address equal to the street address dot value, street address 2, city, again the value, the state, value, the zip code, and the country. Okay, so now that we have this all set up, we can collect the values that the user enters. So let's run this. So we can come over here because we entered this code to open our user form. So if we run this, let's put in some contact info. So we'll call our contact Sally. Oops. Uh-oh. Did you see that? How I entered the first name and I hit tab and it jumped way down here to the street address. And obviously that is not the behavior that we want. So let me show you what happened with that. So let me cancel this. Go back to the form. So you noticed when I copied all of these, I put one in and then I copied it like 8 times. And as I showed you, the default name for these, it was like label 1, label 2, label 3, label 4, and you know the default code names, and the default names for the input boxes would have been the same, you know, text box 1, text box 2, text box 3. But because I the way I copied them and then just spread them out, they didn't get put on the page in that order. And so there is something called the tab order property that we can change. So if I click on this text box and then I come down here and I see tab index, you see this one is 1 and that is correct. But if I click on the next one, this tab index is 15, which is clearly not correct. I want this to be the second box that I go to if I hit tab. So if I change that to 2, and then I'll change this one to 3, change this one to 4, change this to 5, change this to 6, 7, and 8. And you see there's also another property called tab stop, and it's true. That's the default for these input boxes. But if I click on a label the tab stop is, oops, I didn't click it. If I click on a label, the tab stop is set to false, and that's the default for labels, because the assumption is you want to tab through these text boxes, but you don't want to tab through the labels. So you can change it if you want, but you probably don't want to. And so the other ones that we want, probably after we're done filling out this last one, which is a tab index of 8, then we probably want to jump to the submit button. So let's also change the tab stop, and you see that it's true as well. So it will get tabbed to. We want to change this index to 9. And so now if I run this form, you see if I start up in the first name and I hit my tab button, now, now I am tabbing through them correctly, except I skipped this street address. Why did that happen? So I didn't change this one apparently. So it should be 1, 2, this one needs to be 3, this one 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then again the submit button should also be in there, so 9. And now let's try it again. Now if I tab through, boom, 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 that is correct. Okay, and so now if we enter some information, and actually before we enter our information, let's go to the code for this form, and let's put a stop in here, because if we don't put a stop in here, it's just gonna, when we click the submit button, it's gonna run through the code so fast and we're not gonna be able to see the values that we collected here. So this is a breakpoint. I'm not sure if you're familiar with breakpoints, but this allows us to just stop the code at a certain point. So just click over here in this gray bar next to the line you want to stop on. You can't stop on these, on the declaration statements, but you could stop, at the beginning of the procedure or wherever you want to stop. I'll do a video on breakpoints and debugging and stuff like that at some point. But for now, just put a breakpoint here. And then let's come back to our form. So double click here, or you can run it through here and run the form. And now let's enter some information. So we'll call our contact Sally Sweet, and she is the queen of Delancey Street. And so we'll just make it New York. Who knows? I don't know. And the country will be USA. And so now I have all of my fields filled out, and so if I click the submit button, you see now the actual clicking of the submit button triggered this procedure to run. It's an event. The event of me clicking that button caused this event procedure to run automatically. And so we stop at our breakpoint, and if we just step through this by hitting the F8 key, so I hit F8, I can step through this code one line at a time, and now I see if I hover over this, we see the value of the input box is, for the first name is Sally, and, well, we haven't assigned it yet, so if I step through, do F8 to step through one more time, then we see now it's assigned. And then we see the value here is Sweet for the last name. Step through, and now it's Sweet. The value for this is 123 Delancey Street, and we assign it there. We did not fill out this street address to field, so that's blank. And so that is going to remain blank. And then the city is New York. The state is New York. The zip code is whatever, and so the zip code is there. And then the country is USA. And if I step through one more time, that gets assigned to USA. So now we have collected all of that data. And if I just hit F5, it will continue to execute the rest of the code. And so you see we have collected all of this data, but I forgot something because our user form is still on the screen, which obviously we don't want. So let's fix that. So what we want to do is, after we've collected this data, we want to put in, and actually I can't change this now. You see, I'm trying to type here and I can't do it. And that is because this form is still up and I can't, if I click over here, I can't switch either. So do Alt-Tab. I don't know if you're familiar with that, to switch between windows, because I'm kind of stuck here. I can't do anything. Hold down the Alt key and hit the Tab key. And now we switch back over here and we see our form, and just close it, you know, either here or here. And now we're freed up and we can start typing here again. And so we want to do the same thing we did up here. We just want to unload the form when we're done collecting the information. So now you see, if I run the form and I fill it out and then I submit, the form disappears. It closes. Okay, so now that we have our button click event procedure set up so that we are collecting the data and then closing the form, let's do one more thing. First, let's just put a comment in here so that we understand what this unload statement is doing. And then let's just move this to all this to a new procedure, just to make it, you know, more modular and easier to maintain and read and all of that. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing, and then I'm going to paste it down here, and then I'll change the name of this procedure to get contact data. And then I'll take this out because that's not part of this procedure. And then I'll just replace this with this procedure, get contact data. And so now you see, when we look at what this button is doing, it's a little more clear. We're getting the contact data and then we're closing the form. So just to make it a little easier on us and whoever comes after us to maintain this code, including our future selves. So let's run this code. And so now, actually, let's just add some code to write the data that we collected from the user form to the spreadsheet so we can see it. Right now I'm just gonna put it in here, just because of the way this is set up. It's just gonna be easier to write it right in here. In future videos, we're gonna change the way we collect the data, and then we'll make it a separate sub and all that jazz. Okay, so let's just do, we'll just and this is just going to be, I'm just going to list each cell one by one. I'm not going to get too crazy about optimizing it or anything like that. I'm just going to hard code in the addresses here and do it this way. Equals, actually, we're going to have to put this, or I'd put it in here for now. Okay, so first name, and then I'm just gonna copy this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know if that's too many. And then last name, street address 2, city, state, zip code, country. Okay. And then we'll just do it down the side here. So this will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and by the way, I kind of forgot about this. We actually can run this user form from in here, from the code side. We don't have to come back here and run it here. If we are in one of these procedures, if we just hit the run the code button, then we can run it from the code window as well. Okay, so again, if we do Sally Sweet, she's the queen of Delancey Street, New York, New York. And then if we hit submit, we see that our data gets collected and then written to the spreadsheet. Okay, so I think that's it for our video. Obviously this doesn't belong here. It should be in a separate procedure, but like I said, because of the way we did this, I didn't want I didn't want to pass all these variables to another procedure, so I just stuck it down here, but that would not be the way that I normally would do it. But in future videos, like I said, we're going to use different methods to collect the data from the user form, and so we'll address that monstrosity at that time. Okay, well, thank you for watching my video, and I hope it was helpful. Thank you. Bye.